more thing to say.
Say, are you praising me?
No,
No.
I will, but you asked me. That's a trick question, you know.
It is
Only one or one of many?
one of many.
Well, you can take it both ways. It's called a double negative.
Double negative. Okay. So here we are with Ben Wood. Thank you so much for being here today.
Quite welcome.
What was the first time when conversation began with China, or China started a conversation with you?
I was asked to do all the work on the design of Xintiandi in China, in fact, in Shanghai. Even though I had offices in New York and Miami and Boston, Chicago, they said, we want the work done here. And well, actually, I insisted on it being done here. Understand what it means to be Chinese. I'll never be Chinese, of course, but I wanted to try to understand what it meant to be Chinese. The first day I walked through Xintiandi, I was admiring the, somebody had these beautiful plants. They were in pots and they were growing, and they would put them in the sun every day. And I was stopping, I was photographing these, and an older woman, a grandmother, said, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm here to understand the meaning of these small courtyards, because in every other way, these are similar to buildings I've seen in Paris and in London and all over the world. But the one difference is you have a courtyard. And she said, you want to see my courtyard? And I said, yes. So we opened those stone doors. They're called three stone door. And there were these big black doors, and she opened them. Every one of those Lilong, Shikumen, if it had 3 levels, it had 6 families. And it had 1 kitchen. And it was on the back half. There was anyway. But she took me inside, and she and her husband was not well, he was in bed. The parents had left for work. Somehow they managed to, in that one room, create a whole house. Each house had to pay a water bill. They would wear the faucet for their tap around their waist. And each one was different, so that you couldn't sort of appropriate the water of the person next door, because it would go on their bill. So you could tell where somebody lived by matching the faucet to the tap. They were all slightly different.
Oh, so everybody had their own faucet.
When they went off to work, they would leave it at home. But when they were in their pajamas walking around, you could tell where they lived by the color of the tap. And the tap was the same, the handle was the same color as the tap. So they would, if they didn't wear enough difference, they would paint differences. Red spots on a black tap and white spots on a blue tap. And what impressed me was they could leave that house looking like they had a 3-bathroom, 3-bedroom luxury apartment, perfectly clean. They dressed up. About 3 or 4 weeks after I started to work here on Sundays, and I'm pretty sure it was every Sunday, if you were an expatriate, an English speaker, you could volunteer your time. There was a corner of the People's Park where people gathered. It was outdoors, informal. You would go there, and people that wanted to practice their English, and you wanted to try to learn some Chinese, you would go and talk to them. Okay. And a lot of the times it was not only a person, but it was a couple, like a man and wife or friends. Sometimes they would bring their children, and occasionally they would even have a baby in a carriage.
Ah.
There was also a place in Fuxing Park where they had an outdoor ballroom dancing. So I would go over there, and all the men would line up. And this is both men and very few foreigners, mostly Chinese guys. Chinese gentlemen would line up just like you do in a old-time dance hall. And the women would line up on the other side.
Ah, okay. I've seen in the movie.
The women would walk across and tap you on the shoulder, and that means will you dance with me?
Women will do it.
It was not allowed for a man to ask a woman to dance. It was considered rude if you were single and you went to dance with other single people. It was up to the women who they danced with, not the men. And anyway, this older woman, and I was not young, I was, a few months this side of 50. She said, is it true that those postcards, that those young military people, I was only a teenager, but they used to show me pictures from home. They were the first color postcards. They were called Kodak. The GIs would show the young ladies pictures from their home, usually their wives or their family, their mother. And it would, all these beautiful views of the American West. And I had already learned that Megwa means a person from the beautiful place. She said, is it really that beautiful? Just so happened in my billfold, I had a picture of me in my military flight suit getting into an airplane. And she said to myself, you don't look that old. She thought I was a pilot in World War II.
You talked about flying air jets, and before people probably knew you are an architect, you were flying them. Do you feel the altitude, the precision, the way world looks from above, did it shape your architectural eye?
Well, I wasn't just a pilot. Most pilots fly what I call slow movers. Slow movers are things that don't go faster than the speed of sound. Over 95% of the people that fly for any air force in the world are not flying faster than the speed of sound. Flying a Phantom jet, which was at the time I flew it, was the fastest airplane in the world, at least in production. There were test prototypes that were faster, but the only one that was flown what we call regularly as part of the regular Air Force was a supersonic jet. My job was to fly below the radar, literally in the tops of trees. I used to watch the branches go by because I was practicing for be able to penetrate the Iron Curtain without being detected. But the thing you learn about when you fly that low, that fast, is you learn how to use your peripheral vision. Let's take the example of an F1 car driver. They're not looking straight ahead. They judge their speed and where they are on the track by looking to the side. Because if they can only look straight ahead, they can't see the guy trying to come around on the other side who's going to keep them from passing the guy in front. So they use the peripheral vision. And I don't know if you've ever practiced, but you just take your arms and go like this. And this is about 170 degrees. Once you get to 180, you can't see anything. So you learn about how to navigate. When you make a map on a practice mission, say you're flying to Norway from Germany, so you make a map that you flip like this, and every 30 seconds you flip the map again. And the tree patterns are, you navigate by open space versus tree space. And then you learn that every border, you don't have to see the border between France and Germany to know which country you're in, because the tradition of how they farm the land is different. They plow their fields differently.
I see. So you can recognize it through that.
By the time I got out of my 3.5 years in Europe, you could show me a picture of any photograph of any place in Europe. I would say, that's 3 miles from St. Michel. Spatial recognition, but not two-dimensional, three-dimensional. A lot of people in my profession, because they don't hand sketch and they don't have to imagine themselves in a drawing, they use computer modeling to pretend that they understand three-dimensional space. They're not in it. They're looking at it. Yeah. Well, I was in it. I wrote a memoir a couple of years ago. Sir Norman Foster. I've known him for most of my life. And I sent him a copy of my book. And he wrote me back and he said, 2 things in my life I always wanted to be, Ben. A supersonic jet pilot and a great architect. And, you got to be both. I'm jealous. Architects are never famous for finishing their own home
Actually, true. But why is that though?
because they're never satisfied.
Why you think is that people, like even artists too, like when we play, we don't really like listening to our play. And we always think something is missing rather than what we have. Architects apparently are the same.
Why did it take Leonardo da Vinci 40 years to finish the Mona Lisa?
Why?
Because he never wanted to stop painting the Mona Lisa. He had fallen in love with his own creation. And if he ever stopped painting it, it would not be his anymore. It would be the person who paid him to paint it, by the way. He painted that for a patron, and he didn't want to give it up.
The way you phrase it, I never thought about it. Actually, why we continue to try to look for perfection is just also our way of not giving up what we are doing.
It's like that famous refrain from a Beatles song. When the guy goes falsetto, he goes, "Make it better, make it better."
Yeah, that's true.
When he went into the recording studio, that was not going to.
That was not the plan.
That was not the plan, but he did it. And architects do sell their houses, but only after they've found another lover, so to speak.
If we are talking about architecture, I also think when you create, same with composers, when they compose a music, painters, always their compositions or whatever they create stay long after them. How is your personal understanding of legacy?
I never claimed to be an advocate of historic preservation. I'm an advocate of conservation of historic resources. If you're a true preservationist, you're dead, because you think that the way you preserve tradition is by embalming an artifact. It's up to every generation to express themselves. And that's not by embalming. Culture is a living thing. Preservation is preserving the artifacts of culture. And that's like embalming a dead body.
I see your point.
It's not the same. It's not, and I hate the word, and I won't use it, sustainability, but my word is leave a place better than you found it, which means the city belongs to the people that you built it for. My intention when I built, I didn't build it. I don't build things. I imagine things that become real if everything goes well. I hope my granddaughter walks through there someday and said, my great grandfather, contributed to this. I don't care how many lipstick shops or perfume or flagship stores there's still people that will walk through that. I hope it's not a museum by them. I also believe that if you're working to build a city for people, you have to be ruthless in your pursuit of not perfection, but inherent imperfection, so that as generations change, the buildings can change. When I first came to China, we used to say they don't know what they don't know. And today they know. I'm optimistic because they know now that even though they lead the world in the technology of information transfer, they will still find the value in observation, eyes on, what I call eyes on the ground. And in my case, eyes in the air.
If a young architect is watching this podcast, thinking about the future path, or unsure about it, what do you want them to remember?
Luck favors the well-prepared. So people say, you're awfully lucky, Mr. Wood. you got to come to China and you were here in the right place in the right time. And I said I was prepared, because every time an opportunity came along to do something I'd never done, I didn't spend the next 3 or 4 days thinking about it. I said yes. So my advice to young architects is distinguish yourself, not by the buildings you design, but by the fact that you realize that the meaning of a building is more important than the style of a building. Why do constantly people have to try to attract attention by changing something simple into something complicated? And that's what some people in my profession are trying to do. The more ordinary a place looks, the more likely it is to withstand the test of time. Buildings that shout for attention and buildings that rely on technology rather than cross ventilation and fresh air crash eventually. And it's like Yo-Yo Ma told me once. He said, if anybody can play the music and be a good musician, if you want to be a great musician, you have to learn how to play the space between the music. If you go on a trip with a prospective client who's about to give you a huge commission, and all you talk about is how great an architect you are for 3 weeks, don't expect to get the job. You'll get the job if you spend 3 weeks talking to your billionaire client or head of a SOE about things other than architecture, like flying a supersonic jet fighter in the treetops, or learning how to play a violin when you were 4 years old. Or if you're not creative, you can't learn to be creative. It's not true. Everybody's born with creativity.
You think so?
Absolutely. I went from being a civil engineering graduate, spending 1 semester in law school, graduate near the top of my class, and they said, we only have 4 supersonic jets. You graduated number 5. But I said, well, I want to fly a supersonic jet. And they said, well, with the luck, you might be able to. Well, with the luck, the guy that was the top class was married, and his wife said, you can't fly those jets. So I got the 4th jet.
Did you ever meet that guy again in your life?
I saw him, we used to have these reunions, and I always would go up into his wife, and I said, thank you.
Thank you.
My son's graduation from Harvard, and there were 2 speakers. One was the Bill Gates, and one was Bill Clinton. I call it the 2 bills.
2 bills. I was going to say 2 bills.
They both had the same message. And they would say the difference between that young Chinese student and that young student from Boise, Idaho, is only about 1.5%. They share the same DNA, except for that 1.5% that makes them ethnically different. But here, they're the same. So I still ask myself, I say, if Ian Paik can become a famous American architect, why can't I become a not so famous Chinese architect? So it was kind of like my call that says, I may never understand what it means to be Chinese, but it's too early to give up. So I still ask myself, I'm still asking myself that question.
Thank you so much for being here today.
I gotta go. Thank you guys. Great crew. Appreciate it.